Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear viewers, in the previous session, we have been discussing the Ustuwanah al-Mushaf narratives, which have been recorded and specifically recorded in Bukhari. In the previous episode, I had read out to you the text of the narrative from Al-Bukhari and also presented before you the various opinions regarding the Mushaf, which our commentators or our scholars of the past think was the one implied by Ustuwanah al-Mushaf. Ustuwanah, as we all know, means pillar in Arabic, and Ustuwanah al-Mushaf would mean the pillar beside which the Mushaf was placed. Now, the debate here is that which Mushaf is the one implied in this expression. And I had already pointed out in my previous talk that there are two distinct opinions in this regard. One of them is represented by the commentators of Al-Bukhari, Badruddin Aini and Kastalani, both whom posit that the Mushaf which is mentioned in this particular narrative is the one which Usman had most probably placed in the Masjid al-Nabawi, the Mosque of the Nabawi, in the Nabawi Mosque after he had made copies, and which continued to be there at that place until the time that Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid and Salma ibn al-Aqwa arrived in the mosque, as is narrated as is recorded by the narrative, that Salma would seek out the place where the Prophet would pray, a particular pillar where the Prophet would pray, and Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid, who is a freed slave, would ask him that why is he doing so? So the reply obviously from Salama would be that this is the place that the Prophet used to pray. So the question is that is the Mushaf besides which, or the pillar beside which the Prophet used to pray was the one in which, or the one which Osman had copied in his times and which was placed there. Obviously this could only have meant that the Mushaf was placed later on by Osman there, and Salama ibn al-Aqwa was actually seeking the place beside the pillar, not because the Mushaf was placed there, but of course because the Prophet used to pray there. And incidentally, the Mushaf was also later placed there, because obviously the Mushaf of Usman could not have been there in the times of the Prophet himself. So this is the opinion of one group of people who think that the Mushaf which is represented or portrayed in this narrative is the Mushaf of Usman, and which he had, one of the Mushaf of Usman, which he had placed in the mosque of the Prophet, and which continued to be there after the martyrdom for almost 4 to 5 decades until Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid and Salama ibn al-Aqwa spotted it the way it is mentioned in this narrative. Now the second group of, or if I may say, a single person who actually represents the second group is Tamanna Imadi, and he says that the Mushaf which is actually referred to in these narratives is the one which the Prophet himself had copied or had written down, and the leaves of those suhuf were placed in the mosque, on his own mosque after his migration. And the reason it was placed there initially was that the Ansar could also copy out from this suhuf, so that the Muhajirun and the Ansar are at par as far as the copying out of the Quran is concerned. And then later, once they were at par, these suhuf were transported to the Prophet's wife Hafsa radhiyallahu anha, because according to him she was the most literate wife of wives of the Prophet, and they were housed with her. And every time revelation would come down, these Mushaf or Suhuf would be recalled to the mosque of the Prophet. The scribes would write the new revelation into it, and the Sahaba, the companions, would update their own Suhuf or their own copies, and then the Suhuf would be transported back to Hafsa's house. And during this time, when the Suhuf would be transported back to Hafsa's house, the Prophet would actually pray at the place where these Suhuf would be placed when they would be coming from Hafsa's house for the new revelation to be copied. So once these Suhuf would be withdrawn periodically, the Prophet would seek that place where those Suhuf had been placed, and thinking it to be a blessed place, he would pray there. This is what Tamanna Imadi has posited. So I have summarized both these opinions before you once again, and I have referred to them in detail in my previous talk. Now, I would like to now analyze both these views and find out which of these hold the truth, or maybe which is more closer to the truth, or which of these is perhaps, in my humble view, more akin to reality, or if there is some third view, again, that should also be brought up. Now, as far as the views of the commentators of Bukhari are concerned, for example, Aini and Kastalani, this would mean that actually what they are saying is the Musaf of Usman, one of the Masahif of Usman, had been placed in the Mosque of the Prophet, and it continued to be there for almost 4 decades after, because we know that Usman radiallahu anhu died in 34-35 Hijrah, and Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid, although he died in 146 Hijrah, and Salma ibn al-Aqwa died in 74 Hijrah, so it has to be sometime before the death of Salma ibn al-Aqwa that Yazid, who was actually the freed slave of Salma, both of them had come to the Mosque of the Prophet, and they witnessed that particular Musaf to be there. Now, the basic question which arises on this view is that there is not a single corroboratory source in history which says that there was a Musaf of Caliph Usman which was placed in the Mosque of the Prophet, and it continued to be there for many couple of decades at least after his martyrdom. We need to have a corroboratory source for this, because we know the strife which followed after Usman's demise, or his very unfortunate murder. We know that a lot of strife had arisen, and this should have been big news that there was a Musaf of Usman there after his martyrdom, and it continued to be there for 30 or 40 years. So we do not find any corroboratory report of this, and it is very unlikely in the presence of the events which ensued in those times that this could have happened. So therefore, this view does not seem to be very tenable. Now, as far as the view of Tamanna Ahmadi himself is concerned, it also has some questions come to my mind when I look at his view. First of all, it needs to be understood that he himself says that after migration, the Suhuf were placed in the Mosque of the Prophet, and they were withdrawn periodically. Now, there is no corroboratory evidence for this as well. We do not find any history source which say that the Suhuf which were copied in the times of the Meccan era, when after migration the Prophet came to Medina, he had those Suhuf placed in the mosque that he had built in Medina besides a pillar or in a particular place, and then they were periodically withdrawn. We do not find any other source except the one that we have discussed here, or except the one in which Tamanna has conjectured here. And in this particular regard, his conjecture relates to the narrative which I have already described in my previous talk, and which I shall also discuss later on. But except for that conjecture which Tamanna has made, we do not find any evidence of the fact that the Suhuf were placed once in the Mosque of the Prophet and they were withdrawn. The second important thing is that not only Tamanna posits the fact that they were placed, but as I said, he has also described the fact that they were periodically withdrawn from that place, because every time that revelation would be sent down by the Almighty, those Suhuf with Hafsa would be recalled to the Mosque of the Prophet. There the scribes would add the new verses, and the Sahaba would also update their own Masahif, and then they would be transported back to Hafsa's house. Now, this back and forth transportation of the Qur'an being revealed in Medina, we know that a substantial part of the Qur'an was revealed in Medina. So every time verses would be revealed, the Suhuf would be transported to the mosque and then recorded, the new revelation would be recorded, and then the Suhuf would be transported back. So this should be big news, and this should have been recorded in history, and many Sahaba would have reported this fact that the revelation of the Qur'an, the way it was recorded periodically in those Suhuf, in those years that he spent in Medina, this should have been recorded in some part of history, in some portion of history, or Sahaba would have reported how they would have updated their Masahif and how these verses would have been inserted. All these details should have been found in history, but again, we fail to find any corroboratory evidence in the absence of which, of course, this is a big question mark on Tamanna's interpretation. The third question which arises is that Tamanna says that these Suhuf were lodged with Hafsa herself. Now again, in the narrative itself which Tamanna has cited, and in the other narratives which he himself thinks are concocted, what we see is not what Tamanna has actually conjectured. He thinks that in the times of the Prophet himself, these Suhuf were with Hafsa. They were lodged with Hafsa, and only when the revelation would be sent down would be recalled from her, and then the revelation would be inserted. On the contrary, the narrative which he himself has narrated tells us that these suhuf came in the possession of Hafsa after the death of the Prophet, not only after his death, but after the death of Abu Bakr and then Umar. So Umar, who was Ridallah anhu, was her father, after his death, which is almost 12 years after the Prophet, did these suhuf come in the possession of Hafsa. It never came in her possession in the times of the Prophet. Thus, the narrative which Tamanna himself has cited, or which he himself has quoted, has these words, فَهِيَ كَانَتْ إِنْدَهُ, which means in the Abu Bakr, إِلَىٰ أَن تَوَفَّاهُ اللَّهُ. They lied with Abu Bakr, they were lodged with Abu Bakr till he died. And then the words are, ثُمَّ عِنْدَ عُمَرَ حَتَّى تَوَفَّاهُ اللَّهُ. Then they were with Umar till he died, until God took him away. And then the narrative says, ثُمَّ عِنْدَ حَفْصَةَ زَوْجِ النَّبِيِّ. After that, after Umar's death, did these suhuf came in the possession of Hafsa. So we see clearly that even the narrative which Tamanna himself has cited does not corroborate the fact that Hafsa actually possessed these suhuf. And the narrative says that they came in her possession much after the death of the Prophet, in fact, after the death of Umar radiallahu anhu. So this is the third question which arises. The fourth question which arises in my mind is that on the one hand, Tamanna Imadi explicitly says that the narratives of the collection of the Qur'an which are recorded in Bukhari, which relate to the collections of Abu Bakr and Usman radiallahu anhum, are all concocted and they cannot be relied upon. But on the other hand, the narrative that he has presented in the Fazail of Qur'an of Muhammad ibn Usman ibn Abi Shayba, the narrative which he has cited, itself narrates the same sequence of events which have been recorded, almost the same sequence of events of the collection of the Qur'an, which has been recorded by Imam Bukhari, and regarding those collections of Usman and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhum, which he has actually rejected. So in particular, the fact that Usman in his times had summoned the suhuf which lied with Hafsa. So these are the details which are exactly the same as the ones which we find are actually found in those concocted narratives. So which is very, very weird that Tamanna on the one hand rejects the narratives, and on the other hand he actually relies on the details which are recorded in these narratives. In particular, the fact in which this particular narrative that he has cited, in which we find Hafsa giving her suhuf to Usman at his request so that they can be copied. Now, the fourth point of criticism used that comes to my mind is that the narrative which Tamanna has cited from Fazail al-Quran of Muhammad ibn Usman ibn Abi Shayba is also suspect for various reasons. Firstly, we find that there is no other source, no corroboratory source, which calls the suhuf of Hafsa as the words on which Tamanna has placed all his stress, that the suhuf which are called could only have been the ones which the Prophet himself would have recorded in his times and would have trusted his wife to have her in her custody. So this is the only place in which the words occurs. There is no other corroboratory evidence in this regard. Now, the other point which is also essential is that the narrative has suspect narrators in its chain of narration. Thus, for example, we know that the person by the name of Ismail ibn Abdurrahman as-Suddi al-Kabir, he is one of the narrators, and about him, Mizzi records, Hafiz Mizzi records, Yahya ibn Ma'in and Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi regard him to be Zaif. So Yahya ibn Ma'in and Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi regard him to be Zaif. As-Sa'di says that he is a great liar and he abuses the companions. Abu Zura says that he is layyin. Abu Hatim says yuktabu hadithuhu wa la yuhtajju bihi. So this is what we have regarding Ismail ibn Abdurrahman as-Suddi al-Kabir. He is a famous narrator of hadith, and here we find the jarh on him as recorded by Hafiz Mizzi. Now, Muhammad ibn Usman ibn Abi Shayba, he is also suspect. Now, Muhammad ibn Usman ibn Abi Shayba, who is the person to whom this book is ascribed, he himself is suspect, and let me also read out some facts about him. So, although some authorities do regard him to be trustworthy, I would now present what Hafiz ibn Hajar has presented about him in his Lisan al-Mizan. So he says that Abdullah ibn Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abdullah ibn Usama al-Kalbi, Ibrahim ibn Ishaq as-Sawaf, and Dawood ibn Yahya say that he is a great liar. The same thing which we have seen as recorded by Hafiz Mizzi in his Tahzib al-Kamal. He's a great liar, and Ibn Kharash says that he fabricates narratives, that he concocts narratives. Jafar ibn Muhammad at-Tayalsi says that not only is he a great liar, he attributes to people narrations which are never reported by those who have actually heard them. Now, another thing which another person who is suspect is Usman ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Shayba, who is the father of Muhammad ibn Usman ibn Abi Shayba, to whom this book is ascribed. Now remember, the narrative starts with Haddasna Abi, which means that he is narrating this narrative from his father. So his father himself, about him, we find that he is also a suspect. Thus, for example, Al-Uqayli says, Al-Uqayli has mentioned him in his Az-Zurafa, and Ibn Hajar's opinion about him is Lahu Oham. So we find, viewers, that this narrative itself has a number of flaws, and it cannot be relied upon, and therefore this narrative, as far as chain of narration itself, is also suspect. We have already seen some of the other questions which have arisen. And finally, viewers, the sixth question which to my mind comes regarding the interpretation of Tamanna Imadi is that if you recall that he had made one grammatical proposition or grammatical I would say supposition, or his own view in this regard was that the words Al-Ustuwanah allati in the Al-Mushaf are the words which might have caused the confusion that Mushaf was still placed near the Ustuwanah when Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid and Salman ibn al-Aqwa had arrived in their times. Because Al-Ustuwanah allati in the Mushaf would mean the pillar which is near the Mushaf, and signifying the fact that perhaps the Mushaf was still there. According to him, the words which are actually suppressed and which are actually found in some of the, or one word which is actually found in one of the other narratives, and that narrative is found in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. That is Al-Ustuwanah allati inda Mawzi al-Mushaf, which means the pillar which was near the place of the Mushaf, signifying the fact that actually the Mushaf had been withdrawn, and the Prophet would actually pray on the place or the mawzi on which the Mushaf had been posited or stationed. So according to him, if you recall, he says that the opinion of Kastalani and the opinion of Ani perhaps have arisen because they think that the words Al-Ustuwanah allati in the Mushaf would mean that the Mushaf was still there and the Ustuwanah or the pillar was beside that Mushaf. He says one of the other narrations which says Al-Ustuwanah allati mawzi al-Mushaf clearly means that the Ustuwanah which was near the place of the Mushaf, signifying the fact that place was vacant at that time and the Mushaf had been withdrawn, and at that vacant place, or that mawzi, was the place where the Prophet would himself seek to pray, and that was the place where he would pray, because he would think that that was a blessed place. So he thinks that it is perfectly in line with in his own deduction that this was actually the suhuf of the Prophet, which were placed in these beside the pillar, and when it was withdrawn periodically, the mawzi or the place which became vacant was the one in which he prayed. I personally think that even if this particular edition, which is found in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as Tamanna has pointed out, is even accounted for, even then it does not make his case strong. This is because this would not the expression Al-Ustuwanah allati in the Mawzi al-Mushaf does not necessarily mean that the Prophet would have prayed exactly on the spot where the suhuf had been withdrawn, and he would have prayed right on that spot. These words could also mean that he would pray right beside that mawzu. So alladhi inda, the word inda, the zarf or the adverb of place, inda, can easily connote the fact that the Prophet was actually praying near the place from where the Mushaf was withdrawn. So Tamanna's own critique in this regard, or his addition in this regard vis-a-vis Musnad Ahmad's word, mawzi, also, if it is taken into account, I do not think that it makes his case any stronger. So, viewers, if this is the situation that neither of the two opinions holds any ground, then what is the reality behind this whole narrative, and what is the Musaf which these narratives refer to? So this is a question that I have tackled in my own mind, and since I have personally was not satisfied with either Tamanna's interpretation or with the interpretations of Aini and Kastalani, so in my own research I found out that these, if we study history, we find that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, who was the governor of Kufa twice and who died in 95 Hijrah, he actually had introduced the practice of having the Quran read out collectively by people in the mosques, in various mosques, at specific times from its written copies. So Hajjaj in his times actually introduced this practice that people should read out the Quran from written copies, and for this purpose he sent various copies to various mosques so that people could read out the Quran from its written copies. And we also find Imam Malik regarding this to be very, very despicable. He did not like this practice. Thus, for example, we know that Ash-Shatibi in his Al-I'tisam records the following words. He says, "Qala Malik, awwalu man ja'ala musafan al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, yurid annahu awwalu man rattaba al-qira'at fil musaf, isr salat as-subh fil masjid." Malik said, the first person to introduce the practice of reading from the Musaf after the morning prayer, so here we even find it was the morning prayer, was Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Now, Ibn Rajab also records something similar. This has been recorded by him in his Jami al-Ulum al-Hikam fi Sharh Khamseen Hadithan min Jawami al-Kalim. So this is what Ibn Rajab al-Baghdadi has said. And the words are, وَقَالَ Ibn Wahab سَمِعْتُ مَالِكًا يَقُولُ لَمْ تَكُنِ الْقِرَاءَةُ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ مِنْ أَمْرِ النَّاسِ الْقَدِيمِ وَأَوَّلُ مَنْ أَحْدَثَ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَجَّاجُ بْنُ يُوسُف قال مالك وأنا أكره ذلك الذي يقرأ في المسجد في الصحف وقد روى هذا كله أبو بكر نيسابوري في كتاب مناقب مالك رحمه الله. So Ibn Wahab said that he heard Malik say reading out the Quran in the mosque was not a practice of the people from the earliest times. So this was nothing which was done in the times of the Prophet or even later. He says the first person to introduce this practice in the mosque was Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. I do not approve of it. So Imam Malik says that he did not like this, that what is read out in the Musaf from the mosque, what is read out in the mosque from the Musaf. And all that, this is narrated by Abu Bakr al-Nisaburi in his Kitab al-Manaqib of Imam Malik. So this is a clear reference to the fact that Imam Malik did not like this new practice which has been introduced by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in various parts of his territory. Now, we even find the reports of two of these masahif which were sent by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in his times, which has survived to this day. Thus, for example, we find that he sent one copy to Egypt, to the mosque of Umar ibn al-As in the city of Fustat. And we find that this has been recorded by various historians. And we even find that Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan, who was the brother of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, the then caliph, he did not like receiving this Musaf from Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, and he actually said that he'll not take it, and he returned it. And then he had written down, or ordered to be written down, his own Musaf. And then we also find that this is something which happened in his own times, and this induced him to prepare a copy for his own region. The copy was prepared and housed in his own residence. It would be taken to the mosque every Friday and read out and then transported back. And it came to be known as the Musaf of Asma. And we have seen that this has been recorded by various people, like, for example, Ibn Dukmak and Al-Makrizi in their histories. Now, as far as the anecdote of the other anecdote which I just referred to, which has survived, is the one in which we find that Hajjaj has also transported some of these, or sent one of the Musaf that he had prepared to the Prophet's mosque in Medina, the Medina itself. And if I may say that in this particular aspect, I will read out Ibn Zabala's account before you. And Ibn Zabala has recorded his account in his Akhbar al-Madina, which clearly tells us that actually the suhuf which were sent by Hajjaj were placed beside the place on which the Prophet would pray. He clearly says that, and which is a very clear evidence to the fact that perhaps when Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid, he came with Salma ibn al-Aqwa, and Salma was seeking out the place to find out where for a particular place to pray. And when Yazid asked him, then Salma's reply was that he was praying there because the Prophet prayed there, not because the Musaf was placed there. And incidentally, the Musaf were also placed there because the Prophet prayed there. So the two things became united, or they were at the same time existed. So Salma actually prayed there because the Prophet prayed there, and the Masahif which was sent by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf were also placed near the place where the Prophet prayed. So when it was asked in very brief terms that why are you praying beside this pillar, the reply of Salma was because the Prophet used to pray there. This is the Ustuwanah, which although has these suhuf housed, which were the ones which were sent by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, but I am praying here not because these were the suhuf who were placed there, but because the Prophet used to pray there. And this is why we find that the suhuf themselves had been lodged at that place. So I was reading out the text of Ibn Zabala's kitab, a book before you. Let me read out that narrative, that excerpt before you, and it will become evident from that excerpt that it was Hajjaj actually who had sent those Musaf, and it was because of this placement of Hajjaj's Musaf beside a certain pillar that we find that particular pillar was named as Al-Ustuwanah allati in al-Mushaf. So Ibn Zabala says, حدثني مالك بن أنس قال أرسل الحجاج بن يوسف إلى أمهات القرى بمصاحف فأرسل إلى المدينة بمصحف منها كبير وهو أول من أرسل بالمصاحف إلى القرى وكان هذا المصحف في صندوق عن يمين الأسطوانة التي عملت علما لمقام النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So these are the words that need to be noted. وكان يفتح في يوم الجمعة والخميس ويقرأ فيه إذا صليت الصبح فبعث المهدي بمصاحف لها أسمان فجعلت في صندوق والنحية منها مصاحف الحجاج فوضعت عن يسار السارية ووضعت المنابر لها كانت تقرأ عليها وحمل مصحف حجاج في صندوقه فجعل عند الأسطوانة التي عن يمين المنبر. So we have certain further details as well in this, in which we find that Mahdi also did something very similar. So Ibn Zabala reports from Malik ibn Ans that Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf sent Masahif to all major cities. Amongst these, he sent a large Musaf to Medina, and he was the first one to send the Masahif to the cities. The Musaf was in a box that was placed to the right of the pillar, which was a sign of the place where the Prophet stood in prayer. Now, this is something very important, that he placed that Musaf was placed at that spot on which the Prophet used to pray. It would be opened on every Thursday and Friday and would be read after the morning prayer. Al-Mahdi then sent Masahif, which were very expensive, and they were put in a box which was placed near the left of this pillar, and pulpits were constructed on which it was read. At the same time, the Musaf al-Hajjaj was displaced from its place and carried and placed near the pillar, which was to the right of the main pulpit. So when Mahdi in his own times, he came to power, he sent his Musaf again, another Musaf, and then the Musaf of Hajjaj was also displaced. So we find that this practice was continuing after Hajjaj as well. So this is a clear reference to the fact that actually the Musaf which was sent, it was not the Musaf of neither the Musaf Usman or the Musaf of the Prophet himself. It was the Musaf which was sent by Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in his own times to initiate the practice of reading out the Qur'an from a copy of the Qur'an itself. And this was placed beside a pillar, and it was placed beside that pillar where the Prophet used to pray. And Salma ibn al-Aqwa actually would be seeking out that particular place for prayer because the Prophet would pray there. And incidentally, the Musaf had also been placed there. So the placement of the Musaf there was itself because the Prophet used to pray there. And Salma also would be praying there, not because the Musaf was placed there, but because the Prophet would pray there as the tradition went on. Now, let me also give you another reference, and this time it is from Umar ibn Shabba in his Tarikh al-Madina, and we find another report in this regard. So this has been recorded by Muhriz ibn Sabit, and he says that كنت في حرس الحجاج ابن يوسف فكتب الحجاج المصاحف ثم بعث بها إلى الأمصار وبعث بمصحف المدينة فكره ذلك على عثمان فقيل لهم اخرجوا مصحف عثمان يقرأ فقالوا أصيب المصحف يوم قتل عثمان رضي الله عنه قال محرز بلغني أن مصحف عثمان بن عفان سار إلى خالد بن عمرو بن عثمان قال فلما استخلف المهدي بعث بمصحف إلى مدينة فهو الذي يقرأ فيه اليوم وعزل مصحف حجاج فهو في الصندوق الذي دون المنبر. So Muhriz ibn Sabit reports from his father. Actually, this report is report from his father. So the words are actually an abihi. So Muhriz ibn Sabit reports from his father. I was among the guards of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. So he was among the constabulary of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. He wrote the Masahif and then sent them to various cities and sent a Musaf to Medina. So Hajjaj himself, as I said, is a person who had the Masahif written. He sent one copy to Medina. The family of Usman did not like this. They asked, hand over the Musaf of Usman so that it can be read. They replied, it was destroyed the day Usman was assassinated. So when they were asked about the Musaf of Usman, they said that they don't have it because it was destroyed on that day, which also is a clear evidence to the fact that this could not have been the Musaf, as has been positive by Annie and Castellani, that it was the Musaf of Usman, or perhaps one of the copies. The report has reached me, Muhriz said, the report has reached me that the Musaf came into the possession of Khalid ibn Umar ibn Usman. When Al-Mahdi became the Caliph, he sent Musaf to Medina. This was the one which is being read these days. He displaced the Musaf of Hajjaj, which was placed in a box behind the pulpit. So here is another evidence, viewers, which tells us that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf had actually sent his Musaf to the Mosque of Medina, and the family of Usman did not like it. And when they were asked that, okay, they should hand over the Musaf of Usman, they said that they don't have it because it had been destroyed the day Usman had been martyred. But then Hajjaj had his copy placed there. And we also see from this report, as has been seen by the previous one as well, that Al-Mahdi also in his times, he sent a Musaf to Medina, and then he displaced the Musaf of Hajjaj to another place so that his own Musaf could be placed there. So viewers, this is enough evidence, to me at least, that this tells us that the Musaf which these narratives speak of is the Musaf of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf that he had sent in his times, which was placed near that pillar because the Prophet used to pray there. And Salama actually was seeking the place not because the Musaf was there, but because the Prophet used to pray there, as I said. So therefore, the view of the Manna-e-Mahdi, as per which the Prophet himself had left a written Musaf in his own times, and which was later destroyed by Marwan ibn Hakam, seeing that strife, the strife that would ensue would actually cause disruption in this Musaf or even cause additions in it. He had it destroyed. This whole part of the Manna's argument, in which he says that the Prophet had left a written Musaf, stands to great question, because, as I said, these reports on which he has relied, or one of the bases of his reasoning, that the Prophet had left behind a written copy of the Musaf, stands very weakly, because this particular evidence that he has given does not hold water, does not hold any ground. And as far as the narratives themselves are concerned, they tell us of another different history of the Musaf itself, and that was that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, much to the chagrin of Imam ibn Malik, he did not like, he disliked the practice of the Musaf being read from the in certain times from the mosques, because he might have thought that this would become a bid'ah or a religious innovation. So he disliked the fact that the people would sit and gather and recite from a written copy of the Musaf. He disliked it, but in spite of that, we find that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf's tradition would have continued after, and he was the person who actually introduced this tradition. And we can also see from these narratives that Mahdi in his own times also continued with this tradition, and he sent his own Musaf so that people could read out from the Musaf. And so this sheds light on another aspect of the history of the Quran. But as far as these narratives are concerned, to all intents and purposes, it is very clear that the Musaf, which is referred to by Al-Ustuwanah allati ind al-Musaf, this narrative refers to the Musaf which Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in his times had sent to the mosque of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات.